So unique keyboard. There's been a lot to talk about, but a unique keyboard that is also small, or should I be specific, with that 40% form factor. And being a 40% keyboard also means it's kind of tough to justify its value. And to solve that issue, Epomaker bought one of the best 40% keyboard right now in the market for under $100 with its thick keycaps, premium switches, and decent build quality and a premium PCB. And to discuss more about it, let's hop into our today's video with the Epomaker TH40. Today's review unit was sent to me by Epomaker themselves, and Epomaker has been one of the largest keyboard brand out there with stacking their inventories with keyboards, keycaps, switches and so much more. Today's TH40 can be bought from them for $79, or for Bangladeshi folks out here, it can be also purchased from Tech Diversity, who also shipped it to me. Both of the Epomaker website's purchase link and Tech Diversity's link will be added in the description box. And now onto the video. So let's start the video with a quick unboxing of this keyboard. And the unboxing experience of this keyboard was pretty premium along with the premium box it comes in. And opening the box, at first we get the user manual of the keyboard with all the necessary infos about it. And the manual is pretty much essential to know about the key layout of this small keyboard. Then at the top we get a long accessories box, and in it we get the 2.4 GHz dongle of this keyboard, which can receive up to 1 kHz polling rate. And after that we get the braided Type-C to A cable, and it felt pretty premium. And after that we get the standard keycap and switch puller combo, and lastly we get 2 extra switches in the box, and that's all to the accessories. Finally, getting the keyboard out of the plastic wrap, we get a look at the today's beautiful small keyboard, and that's all to the unboxing. Speaking of the build quality of the keyboard, even though looks like a pretty bare basic keyboard, the beauty of it lies in here. Epomaker went with a simple yet a premium shell design for the build and a moderate case thickness to make it pretty premium to hold on. Even though it looks like a black color keyboard, the color accent of the case is slightly dark olive colored, which might pair well with some greyish green color keycaps. And the 40% layout of this also introduces the lack of many important keys, which gets solved with the multiple FN key layer, and learning this can be a bit tricky, but you will get eventually used to it after a few weeks. Also, the keyboard has pretty thick bezel on the top and the bottom part, which is necessary for the gasket mount, which we are gonna be seeing in the tear down part. And speaking of gasket mount, even though this keyboard is gasket mounted, there is pretty minimal flex on the middle of it, and it didn't have any kind of weird flex to the chassis even after doing flex test on it. This means the keyboard has a pretty firm build quality to it. And going on the back, we get to see there is pretty minimal look to the keyboard with the branding on the middle, and there is a single stage of fit which gives about 5 degrees of inclination, which is justified as the keyboard is already inclined about 10 to 15 degrees. And continuing with the minimal look, there was pretty much nothing on the top of the keyboard without the tri-mode switch and the Type-C port. And last but not least, the keyboard comes with a side fabric strap, which makes the already lightweight keyboard more carryable and pocket friendly, and you can also remove it by removing the 2 screws if you don't like the straps beside the keyboard. Overall, this keyboard has a pretty good build quality to it. Now about the keycaps, and the keycaps of this TH40 is one of the best keycaps I have seen, if not the best, below $100 price range. These are dice-up PBT keycaps and is of cherry profile. And the keycaps also have pretty good grainy surface on it, which has good grips on the finger. The double shot layer of these keycaps is different and in fact thicker than the normal keycaps, which is of 1.3mm thickness. But measuring these keycaps, we see that all the keycaps have 1.7mm thickness on the alpha keys and 1.8mm on the modifiers like the enter, spacebar and etc. And this thickness contributes to the deeper sound profile of the keyboard with the switches it comes in. And no, there was no switch interference with these keycaps, as you can see here. Overall, I am personally a fan of these keycaps. Then comes the switches. This TH40 comes in 2 types of switches. One is the Wisteria switch and another one is the Flamingo switch. And both of these are manufactured by Epomaker themselves. So at first, let's come to the Wisteria switch. And these Wisteria switches are one of my favorite switch I have tried this year. This is a Thoki medium heavy linear switch with around 45 grams of actuation force and pre-travel is around 2.2mm with the total travel of around 3.6mm. And not to mention, it has the usual Cherry MX housing with being 5-pin, and for the build, the top housing of this switch is made out of polycarbonate plastic. The stem is made out of POM plus PTFE mixed plastic, and this gives the stem a bit softness to the density and makes it smoother. And this stem measures around 13.4mm in length, which is the standard size for a regular switch. And then there's the stainless steel spring, and it's a pretty long one with around 20mm in length. And lastly, the bottom housing is made out of PS66 plastic. Then going to the Flamingo switch, this is another 5-pin but a slightly thin sounding, like almost a clacky switch. This is also a medium heavy linear switch with around 47 grams of actuation force and pre-travel of around 1.5 to 2mm with total travel being of 3.8mm. And going for the breakdown of it, the top and the bottom housing is made out of polycarbonate plastic with MX steel housing, and this polycarbonate housing results in the clacky sound profile of this switch. The stem of this switch is of box stem and it's made out of POM plastic, and this box stem makes the switch have less wobble while pressing it and makes the switch kind of dust proof with increasing the switch's durability. And not to mention, this stem is around 13.5mm in length. And lastly, the spring is dual stage stainless steel spring. This results in a heavier switch, and this spring is around 21mm in length. Overall, I personally prefer the Wisteria switch over the Flamingo switch for the thuggy sound profile, which I am fond of. For the steps, these steps are custom-made plate-mounted steps from Epomaker themselves. The steps were properly lubed and didn't have any kind of excess lube dripping out of it, and nor the lube was thin. And these POM plastic steps were balanced and pretty much rattle-free. So in my opinion, these steps are pretty reliable one from Epomaker themselves. And the RGB of this keyboard, for me personally, is one of the brightest one I've seen in the budget keyboard scene, with full, perky, south-facing RGB. And controlling the RGB is pretty much simple with onboard options like pressing FN plus Enter, Z, C or V keys and choosing your preferred RGB modes. And this RGB can also be controlled by the software, and the software of this keyboard is the VIA one, since this keyboard is VIA plus QMK compatible. And to get the keyboard registered in VIA, just grab the file from the Epomaker's website and load the JSON file in VIA, and then you finally get the access to the keyboard. And in typical VIA fashion, you get access to key customizations and setting up the multiple FN layer with macro and other settings. And also you can control the RGB, but sadly there is no perky RGB control option in VIA. But overall, adding VIA is a big plus one for me. Now time for the disassembly of this keyboard, and this part was the least favorite part, as this TH40 was really hard to open up, as the top and the bottom case was tightly fitted and almost felt like I am gonna break my keyboard. But finally I got to open it up, and at first we have the top case, and this top case seemed like a normal one and is made out of ABS plastic and a pretty dense one. Not to mention, it didn't feel flimsy at all. Then we get the plate and the PCB sandwiched together with screws, which when opened, at first we get the PC plate of this TH40, and thankfully Epomaker didn't give flex cut plate unlike the other keyboard manufacturers, which reduces the plate flex and gives the keyboard a bit more uniform typing experience. And not to mention, the top and the bottom side of this plate comes with 4 gaskets on each side, and these gaskets are made of poron foam unlike the commonly used silicone gaskets. And the benefit of poron gaskets is it gives more softness to the cushioning impact of the plate that is sandwiched between the top and the bottom case, and gives a bit better gasket performance. Then we get a layer of poron foam between the plate and the PCB, which helps to dampen the sound, and this foam is about 2.5mm thick. Following this, we also have a layer of IXP sheet, then a layer of PET sheet for more balanced sound experience, and then finally we get our hands on the PCB. And man, it's been really long time since I got my hands on a non-flex cut PCB. It has a more uniform typing experience along with the non-flex cut plate, and the PCB of this keyboard is a pretty premium one on the first look of it. On the PCB we have our 5-pin hot swappable sockets with south-facing LED, and this PCB supports for both 2.5U and 2.5U spacebars for the split layout, along with 6.5U spacebar, which can also be PCB screw mounted, and this is a plus one to the PCB. Going on the backside of it, and ignoring the glue residue, which I am explaining later on, we see that the hot swap sockets of this keyboard is from JWE, and it's of pretty good quality, and the rest of the PCB seems pretty clean, with a single JST connector to power on the keyboard and 3 LED on the top corner for the modes. and I must say this is a pretty good PCB to come in a budget pre-built. And now for the part I personally disliked about. The glue residue you saw earlier is because of the EVA foam being glued on the backside of the PCB, which resulted in not being able to disassemble the keyboard without ripping the foam apart, and this making a mess on the PCB. But as I ripped the foam apart, we get to see another layer of poron foam on the bottom casing with a awkward looking glued state on it. And I later substituted this poron foam layer with PE foam sheets. And lastly we get to the bottom case, which is pretty empty and makes the keyboard less heavy, which also makes the keyboard a bit hollow sounding, and you can try doing coin mod or something similar to it to increase the weight and make it a more versatile sounding keyboard. And on the bottom case there is a 3000 mAh battery, which lasted me about 7 days on wireless with RGB on, and also having around 4 hours of usage. So time for the verdict, should you grab this or not? And if you're looking for a budget 40% keyboard, or you wanna try something interesting layout that has overall a good build quality and software support, this TH40 is definitely a recommended one for you with almost zero flaws in it. The only nitpick I can do for this board is the lack of ease of opening this keyboard and not being that much modding friendly. But after modding this keyboard, it can sound much better than the stock sound it has. So there's my hot take for the TH40. Yes, I have already praised this keyboard a lot and also have been pretty much positive throughout this review, but that isn't any kind of bias to it. This keyboard is actually well built for a $80 40% keyboard as per the market, so I hope you will enjoy it if you intend to grab it. So that's all for today, and thank you for watching, and do give a like and subscribe for more future videos, and stay safe.